Visitors from all over the world come to experience the wonders of Joshua Tree National Park. They come for rock climbing, dark night skies, wildflowers, and to see the expansive desert landscape. But in the 19th century, people were drawn to this area for very different reasons. Rugged individuals came to try their luck at cattle ranching, mining, and homesteading. The story of William F. Keyes and his family demonstrates the hard work and ingenuity it took to not only survive, but prosper in the high desert. Welcome to Keyes Ranch. This historic area is strategically tucked in a remote, rocky canyon in the Mojave Desert. Bill Keyes and his family lived here from 1910 until 1969, but they weren't the first people to call this area home. It may be hard for visitors to imagine surviving in the desert, but we have evidence that Native Americans occupied this area for thousands of years. Right here on the property of Keyes Ranch, we have a site where Native Americans would have found food in the form of mesquite beans, acorns from this scrub oak, and nuts from this pinyon pine, water in this wash that may have washed down off the wonderland of rocks, and shelter here in this little alcove behind me. Here we're looking at a bedrock mortar. This is a spot where Native Americans would grind the acorns from the scrub oak or the seeds from the honey mesquite tree into a flour. You can see there's been a big well created from them grinding those seeds into flour over the years. In the mid-19th century, another group of people were drawn to this area. Imagine behind me grass growing hip-high. This was an attractive place for cattlemen to bring their cows in the wintertime because it didn't get as cold here as it did other places. From about 400 years ago until the mid-1950s, this area received an average annual rainfall of 10 inches a year. In recent history, we've only received about 4 inches per year. Two cowboys that used this area in particular were Bill and James McCaney. These are cattle rustlers. They'd steal cattle in Los Angeles, bring them here to the secluded canyon, rebrand them, and then drive them east to Phoenix where they'd sell them. In Phoenix, they would steal more cattle, which they'd bring here, rebrand, and then drive on to Los Angeles. After running their cattle rustling operation for a little while, Bill and James heard about a very profitable gold mine located not too far from this canyon. It was called the Desert Queen Mine. Legend has it that they had a meeting with the owner of the Desert Queen Mine, and at the end of the meeting, the owner had been shot and the McCaney brothers had the deed to the mine. Bill's role in this operation was to dig ore out of the mine. James's job was to get that ore processed and then take the gold to pay off some loans that the brothers had. But James liked shopping more than he liked paying off loans, so eventually the bank foreclosed on the mine. The bank eventually sold Desert Queen Mine to an investor from Pasadena named Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan was a businessman, and he wasn't about to move to the desert and take up gold mining, so he hired a caretaker to live on this property and work the Desert Queen Mine. That caretaker's name was Bill Keyes. While Bill did quite a bit of mining himself, in his later years he made most of his money processing ore for other miners. In hard rock mining, granite is blasted apart with dynamite. Those chunks of rock are called ore, and miners use carts like these to transport them to mills to be processed. Bill ran a two-stamp mill called Wall Street Mill, not too far from the Desert Queen Ranch. Stamp mills process ore by crushing it. First, chunks of ore are placed in the hopper where they get chewed up to a finer consistency. Then they travel down a conveyor belt to this iron stamp. The iron stamp moves up and down 60 times a minute, pulverizing rock until it's fine enough to fit through a screen of this gauge. The pulverized rock is then washed over an amalgam table, which has been coated with mercury. Flecks of gold stick to the mercury, and once all of the ore has been washed over the table, the mercury will be collected and placed into a bone ash crucible. The crucible will then be placed into a retort, where the mixture will be heated up until the mercury vaporizes. The mercury is collected for future use, and left in the crucible is the miner's gold. It could take 12 hours or more to process a ton of ore. The price of gold varied, but Bill charged a flat rate of $5 per ton. finding just 1 ounce of gold in your ton of ore was considered profitable. Bill Keyes had many skills. He was a cowboy and a cattleman, a farrier for his horses and burros, a farmer, a blacksmith, a miner, a mason, an amateur geologist, and an engineer. Part of what made him so successful was his instinct for collecting anything that he found and his ability to reuse those items for other purposes. The nearest town where Bill could get supplies was Banning, over 60 miles away. Often he made do with what he had. He collected old vehicles, discarded farm equipment, and all sorts of miscellaneous items that you can see here in the salvage yard. This Mack truck is another example of Bill Keyes finding something discarded in the desert and bringing it back to the ranch to give it a new life. Apparently the truck was stuck in a sandy wash, buried up to its axles, but Bill dug it out and went on to use it here at the ranch. Bill met his future wife, Frances May Lawton, at a rodeo in Big Bear in 1917. Originally, the two made plans for Frances to come up and see Desert Queen Ranch, but Bill must have gotten nervous because he went ahead and asked her to marry him before she'd had time to make the trip. Frances said yes and went on to spend the next 56 years of her life in the Mojave Desert. In the next episode, we'll see what it took for Bill and Frances to raise a family at the Desert Queen Ranch. Joshua Tree National Park offers ranger-guided tours of Keyes Ranch for visitors who want a more in-depth look at the lives of the Keyes family. As a historic place with many artifacts, for your safety and to ensure protection of the resource, visitors to the ranch must be accompanied by a ranger. This helps to preserve the historical value of the site for visitors today and for future generations.